is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Body of new Grant mechanic found near home. Caribbean Airlines expands with new flights to the French Caribbean. 4 arrested in Felicity after police chase. Regionally, $27 million block commissioned at West Demerara Secondary. And internationally, UK to hand over Chagos Islands to Mauritius in historic deal. Now for the details. The body of a New Grant resident, Ralph Samlal, was discovered Wednesday morning near his home on Ariane Drive. The 58-year-old mechanic was found in bushes not far from his residence around 9 a.m. with minor bruises and blood on his face. Police were alerted and officers led by Sergeant Charles responded to the scene. A district medical officer examined the body before it was removed. While foul play is not suspected, a post-mortem has been ordered to determine the exact cause of death. PC Khan continues investigations. Caribbean Airlines is expanding its regional services with new flights to Martinique and Guadeloupe starting December 3rd and December 7th, respectively. The airline will operate 4 flights weekly to both destinations, subject to government approval. This move is part of CAL's strategy to improve connectivity across the French, Spanish, Dutch, and English-speaking Caribbean. The airline launched flights to Puerto Rico and will begin service to Tortola on October 14th. CAL CEO Gavin Madeira expressed excitement, highlighting the reduction in travel time to just 90 minutes for routes that traditionally took hours. Ticket sales are now open. At around 12:47 a.m. on October 3rd, police officers on patrol in Felicity intercepted a white Kia van TDX 8501 linked to a series of robberies. Officers from Shogunas Mobile and ERP 152 apprehended 4 suspects following a high-speed chase along Pear Road. The arrested men are Justin Ramkisoon, Christopher Singh, Josiah Bruce, and Renzial Ramdial. Several stolen items, including 15 cell phones, ID cards, and house-breaking tools were recovered. Investigations into the robberies are ongoing, with Shogunas and Canupia CID continuing inquiries. Regionally, 6th form students at West Demerara Secondary School in Region 3 are set to benefit from the addition of a new $27 million 2-story building, which features 5 large classrooms and other essential amenities, and will create a spacious environment for some 150 6th form students. A Department of Public Information release stated Wednesday. It informed that currently 33 students are enrolled in Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Examination studies at school, which offers a variety of subjects including economics, physical education, communication studies, law, and integrated mathematics. Minister of Education Priya Manik-Chand, who spoke at the commissioning ceremony Wednesday, said the upgrade is part of the government's broader plan to ensure all schools are equipped with the necessary facilities for students to excel. Internationally, the UK has announced it will give up sovereignty of the Chagos Islands, including Diego Garcia, to Mauritius after over 50 years of control. The deal follows decades of negotiations and includes provisions for the US-UK military base on Diego Garcia to remain operational for regional security. While the treaty is yet to be finalized, both sides have committed to a swift resolution. The agreement also addresses past injustices, offering support for Chagosians and allowing Mauritius to begin resettlement, though not on Diego Garcia. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
When authority is total, so too is the madness of the man who declares it, and the potential for abuse of power. I'm sure Michael Smallhead, this is talking about WESN, the content capital. And one of the issues that we're going to get into is the abuse of power. Ironically, not with the politicians. Usually, when one says that, I am sure that's what you would assume it to be. After the politicians comes the very rich and wealthy, private business owners, investors, etc., etc. The influencers. The thing about it is, I believe we generally have a decent idea. We don't have an accurate idea or an accurate account, a proven, accurate, with physical evidence to measure the amount of abuse of power that goes on in TNT, particularly in our government and government service. But we, I think, generally have an idea. Tell me what corner of the public service or the government you are confident in does not have someone abusing their power and authority. Anyone, anywhere. Because to some extent, I would question that there would have been at least some of the population who would have probably criticized the last 4 prime ministers of abusing their power or authority in one way or another. Obviously, the most recent examples come to mind is the current administration. But then, of course, there was the Section 34 situation in the previous administration. Of course, Mr. Manning had his own detractors. I might be too young to actually remember, for all of the criticisms of Mr. Pandey, which one specifically would be for abuse of power. So I leave that up to you to fill in. And I'm sure people want to go as far back as Eric Williams to talk about abuse of power. But to some extent, why do we limit it, 1, to politicians, and 2, if we have a general idea about it, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to accept about it? And that last part is my acknowledgement of what we generally do. We accept and tolerate a lot. With power comes the abuse of power. And where there are bosses, there are crazy bosses. It's nothing new. This coming from journalist Judd Rose. And I would argue that you don't need to necessarily just look at the man at the top or the politicians in charge to apply this code to. Because to some extent, one could argue, yes, we highly suspect, if not see, to some extent, examples of abuses of power, but also of essentially bosses being crazy. And again, I think this could generally be applied to every entity in the public service. Not to say that all public servants do this, but even the ones who do not have a management or supervisory role, they still have power that can be abused. It's one thing if a clerk maybe had a rough day, had to deal with some really bad citizens who roughed them up a little bit, so they're not necessarily going to have a pleasant smile and going to be happy dealing with another 100 citizens in the afternoon who may or may not treat them like crap. So they might answer back. But it's another thing entirely when all of a sudden a clerk or admin person or a customer service rep is doing things to make a citizen's life difficult, or even worse, doing things looking for, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? They're just looking for something, anything. You know what I mean? They're not going to say it. Or maybe they would. In some cases, they might be that bold. I think the most recent example, the most recent story, I can't remember. Well, it was on budget night, where essentially for a certain document, $1,000 was, I guess you could say, unofficially requested. And that's the thing. We tolerate a lot. But then, and this is where, ironically, it's wrongfully, we limit our complaints in the moment. Generally, everybody will blame the politicians, and hey, they have their fair share. But we kind of support the whole process and the whole environment. And we play a part in it. And some even participate in it, which I don't understand. I get it that people want to get ahead, but I think one of the things that a society needs to understand that as it matures is that if your means of getting ahead is to step on someone else, well, some of you could live with yourselves at night with it. I don't know how, but there are those who fool themselves and are blissfully ignorant and don't understand that if you're stepping on someone or taking from someone in order for you to get ahead, how right is that? And more importantly, if that's how you get ahead, that's how you develop, the society isn't developing because we're just moving things around rather unfairly. But like I said, someone tell me where there's a corner of public service, not necessarily an individual. I acknowledge and accept and agree and will defend the fact that there are many individuals who are clean, who are trustworthy, who act in good faith, who uphold what should be the behavior and the values and the morals of someone serving the public. But not all of them. And as you generalize institutions, which ones does not have any abuse of power? There might be some out there, and if they are, they should be rewarded at the minimum with recognition. So I challenge the viewers this morning on that. With that said, let's start today's Daily Review. And speaking of abuse of power, one of the stories that I was slated to get into yesterday, because I said yesterday there were a lot of negative press for the TTPS. One of the worst and direct ones, and we'll get into that a little bit later, is the kidnapping, which involved, allegedly, 3 police officers and an official police vehicle. The other one that is directly looking really bad for the police is with regards to a certain case where a husband and wife in a household were arrested. And the manner by which they were arrested has caused a judge to basically say, now the state will pay them $500,000 in compensation for their arrest and prosecution by the police that was deemed, this is straight from the report, devoid of logic. But then the judge goes on to say, well, beyond saying that there was abuse of power, that the credibility of the police in this case, in the court's view, tainted by obvious untruths and the evidence cannot be trusted on the material issues. The chain of events clearly demonstrates to the court that the police appeared to be motivated by ill will and spite towards the claimants. Apparently, the police went into the house to search the house. They arrested the man in the house. He was released the next day without a charge. And then 2 days later, the police came back. They searched the house, found nothing again. Then they brought a dog. Then they declared they found something. The claimants accused the police of planting evidence. Then the case was eventually dismissed because the police failed to attend court. And beyond the fact that it seemed as though to the judge that this was a poorly orchestrated attempt to introduce false evidence, there was also, in his opinion, the most glaring evidence of the absence of a search warrant in the first place. We have an issue with crime. We have the police executives want to come out and tell us, oh, but major crimes are down, murder rate might be high, but we can't judge everything by the murder rate. That's fine. The thing with anecdotes like this, one situation of cops that have the veneer of being corrupt, that have the appearance, that do things to cause a judge to say things, a judge to say things that then might cause the public to perceive corruption, to perceive malice to citizens, no matter what the justification is. The law is the law. If we allow these things to happen, assuming that they happened as the judge said that it happened, as the court ruled that it happened, if we allow these things to pass, it will eventually happen to the rest of us. It will not be limited to the gangsters and the criminals. These shortcuts will not be limited to the criminal element. Remember the father who said before he wanted to see the police, yes, shoot up the criminals, until one of the deceased was his own son. And then the reality of taking such shortcuts to justice, unfortunately, hit him hard. But kudos to him for not necessarily looking to only point fingers at others and not necessarily take responsibility for his own stance. These things cannot be allowed to go unchecked. Even one case is too many. And then, like I said before, with regards to the 3 police officers involved in kidnapping, allegedly, they were arrested. Are there other cases like this that we don't know about? I would just like to know. Because if this is how we're going to bump up our stats for our detection rate with regards to maybe allegedly getting alleged people involved with criminal activity off the streets, we done missed the boat. Because if you have to make up stuff or fabricate stuff, chances are that means that what, you're incapable of actually finding the real criminals out there. This is not a situation where you're fishing on a lake and there's no fish in the water. There's fish abound. You just need to throw the net from the shore. You will pull in enough fish to feed your village for 6 months probably. You just need to be able to throw a net probably from the steps of the police station, and you could haul in countless criminals. They even had an attack of somebody like right a few feet away from a police station a while back. Remember that? You don't have to go far to find criminals if you have the capacity to actually collect evidence and arrest them. But for whatever reason, at a time when we don't have a lot of confidence in the capacity to deal with crime, we have police that are alleged. Now, this is a while ago, though, but still, it speaks to one squad, one song. That's the kind of mentality that would be required in a situation like this. So, flubbed murder trials notwithstanding, how many more incidents like this are out there that we don't know about? Therefore, they can't be part of the TTPS's official crime statistics. And is this even classified as a crime? What are the repercussions for the officers in this situation? When a judge basically has to call them out for being malicious. It doesn't matter if the gentleman and his wife, pregnant wife by the way, when all of this went down, and I believe she and her husband was held after they found whatever. Will we see any repercussions for this? I mean, maybe the officers involved might get promoted. You could kidnap a man and get a promotion because you're playing ball. So then now, here's the next question. How far up the ranks does one squad, one song, unofficially, allegedly, go? Is this a government squad? Or maybe the government has their squad and in TTPS they have their own squads. It might sound a bit far-fetched and extreme, but the fact of the matter is, I always say transparency works for you. If you let it, if you understand it. Most politicians don't, right? The Prime Minister generally does not. The Minister of Finance does not. That's why the Auditor General fiasco was such a fiasco. The opposition leader does not. Many government ministers do not. A lack of transparency works against you. That also seemingly is something that is very basic, but they also don't understand. And most government officials do not understand that. Most politicians do not understand that. That's why they want to complain about the reporting in the media. I'll say it before and I'll say it again and I'll keep saying it. If you don't want to engage with us, why do we need to take your perspective into account and to give it due consideration? Because most of the time we don't know what it is, and you just giving your very sanitized and safe press release or media release through a written document, written and published probably by a staffer, not by you. You just approve it because you're trying to see how safe you could make it, as opposed to trying to tell us something truthful and honest and something that will solve the issue. If you don't want to engage, then we don't necessarily need to give any special consideration to whatever difficulties you may or may not have. Like, oh my gosh, this job is too hard, please understand, it's a hard job. Well then, let someone else do it. If running the country is too hard, let someone else do it. If running the police service is too hard, let someone else do it. If you can't find the murderers, let someone else do it. And the fact that we have these things, and this was back in 2018. This isn't something that developed, 2016. This isn't something that developed recently. This is something that's been there for a while. You want to think this is the only one that happened? We had eyewitness testimony about a soldier involved in a home invasion that had to be retracted because people can't feel safe reporting to the authorities when some of the authorities are apparently part of the criminal problem. But don't worry. A politician every 2 to 3 months will say things like, we understand people are upset and are scared, and we will leave no stone unturned so that you could feel safe. Somehow, feel safe. Because we tell you to feel safe, not because it actually is. Let's move on to the next story, because it gets a little bit more interesting. So this one, I'm not entirely sure I fully understand it or agree with it. This is not necessarily per se, this is the one story that is not necessarily per se making the TTPS directly in a bad light, but it involves a story that does. One High Court judge had granted an interim injunction to allow suspended former head of the disbanded Special Operations Response Team to challenge the promotion process from the ranks of inspector to assistant superintendent. Here's the thing. I would like to know, how could someone who is suspended and has a criminal matter, whether he will eventually be innocent or guilty involved. He is a police officer with allegations against him, allegations that cannot be dismissed easily. Thus he's suspended. How is it that, I don't get it. Should he have a reasonable expectation to be promoted in that situation? Because again, think about it. Every now and then, doesn't somebody try to tell us, no, promotions are based off of merit, meritorious service. Look, the process to select commissioners and deputy commissioners is, we don't want to tarnish their meritorious service. That's why we need to not have these things aired in public, because transparency bad, right? But he's suspended. He's been suspended for a couple of years now. He was suspended by the previous commissioner. So what has he done recently? What is his track record as a police officer, besides time in service, to warrant him being considered for promotion? Or does this reveal the fact to some extent that it's really just based on seniority? And you could put a dead fish in a TTPS uniform, and if it's officially on the payroll as an employee for a certain length of time, it will be promoted. Let's not forget, this case was with regards to the fact that two men who may or may not have been involved in the Andrea Barrett murder, I can't say that they were involved in all certainty because they were never tried and convicted. We never even saw the evidence as the public, because it immediately turned into a double potential homicide. I say potential just to not be absolutist, but that's what it looks like, right? Because two suspects, not just one, two suspects died in police custody. The alleged falling off of a chair, right? Obviously, when that statement is said, that's not exactly how they died, but they died. And I'm pretty sure they both did not die of an acute and sudden bout of cancer or obesity or complications from diabetes or COVID. And he was the officer in charge. Now, maybe he wasn't involved, maybe he didn't know, maybe the officers underneath him, they did it all, those who were involved, and he had no idea. But again, this is not something that could be easily brushed aside, right? Because I would say innocent until proven guilty, that's the standard. But then, let's just say he was innocent of criminal charges. Potentially something really bad happened under his watch. And it's not like he's the CEO and like a ground level team of maintenance workers did something really bad. These are the people who I believe were directly underneath him, that his unit had a bad result. We still don't necessarily know exactly how that result came to pass, but he was in charge. So again, dare I ask, exactly what part of policy, because the judge is allowing it, which is what I'm kind of wondering, right? It means that there's something there that I'm not necessarily seeing. I'm not an HR professional, much less an HR person in the TTPS. But what is it that you could allow someone who is suspended because you had something really bad, well, a bad result coming out of his unit, apparently, allegedly. It is alleged. So we have a bad result that led to him being punished. And I'm pretty sure if his punishment was unwarranted, he probably should have sued for that long time ago. And yet he wants to be promoted. So here's the kicker. He wouldn't necessarily do it if he did not have a reasonable expectation that within the environment and the precedent set of the operations of either the police service, the protective services of national security, or the public service, he didn't have some basis maybe of precedents, of how these things are done, of how these organizations operate. Because again, the government's not saying Brent Thomas was kidnapped. It's just that they can't say he was legally arrested and deported either. So then what's left for you to say? Except based on the Commonwealth definition of kidnapping, that he was kidnapped. And there was a promotion there. So you know what? Yeah, man, Mr. Hernandez, you go get your promotion. And if it seems silly, and if it seems something that should not happen and it seems improper, I would just like to point out that the real issue is that it seems as though this thing is above board in how our police service is administered. And then if that's the case, I don't know about the rest of you, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I am overly dramatic and I'm an alarmist and I'm just looking at these things in the most negative manner possible. I just don't think that this is a good look. I just think that unless we get more information, something is very wrong here. And if this is business as usual for our protective services, which at least the media ambassadors will acknowledge that they are perceived to be held at a higher standard or actually held at a higher standard by the public, maybe not so much by the political class and the bureaucracy. How could this stand? Where is the higher standard in something like this? I don't understand. It's things like this that make me think that not only is Trinidad is not a real place, but I would like to leave because I want to live in some kind of reality grounded in reasonableness. But c'est la vie. It's the things, some of these things are just glaring out there in the public. They're very obvious. And I guess it's acceptable to the general public and the voting population. So what else can I say? Except we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll welcome my guest and we'll continue. Yeah, budget, we're going back to that. I know. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WSN, the Economic Capital. We'll be right back after this. Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today. I know what you mean.
I'm back here and talking about WSND Content Capital and switching gears slightly because we're switching gears on the analysis of the budget, but we're still on the budget. Yes, I know. We have, instead of an economist or a former Minister of Finance, we have a political scientist, a political educator, a political commentator, Dr. Shay Mohammed. Welcome to Talking Points, sir. It's great to have you once again. So, I mean, first things first now, one of these questions that I like to ask because it's open-ended, right? And I think with something this large, well, actually, yes, I have two questions I want to ask. One of them is directly involves the length of time. But the first one, of course, is to you, what was the thing that stood out to you as you had to sit down, I assumed, and if you didn't, I will not blame you for it because you didn't miss much. But when it was initially presented, you know, what was your initial reaction to this ongoing soliloquy of aren't we great from the Minister of Finance?
I can't use the language I would like to use on national TV. So I'll say it, and I would say it in a way that I think the greater Trinidad and Tobago would understand. What level of utter rubbish am I listening to? Where is this is a man that chose to stand up for 5 hours. And yes, I did take notes. I have all of my notes here, all, 10 pages of notes that I was taking and questions that I was asking. And I will share them with you. But what absolute and utter rubbish was he talking? Beating his chest about absolutely nothing, talking about 2010 to 2015. That time has passed, elapsed to use legal language. Couldn't actually solidify an achievement of this government that would have had a trickle-down effect to say to citizens that we did X, Y, and Z, and you are benefiting from X, Y, and Z. That just evaded me altogether.
Well, then, with regards to the length of time, I can't remember who mentioned this. But one of the things that I heard was the reason why the minister went for 5.5 hours or more is because apparently it's a one-upmanship in the House. So I think last year the leader of the opposition basically went on for longer, right?
No, she can't. She can't go on for longer because the standing orders dictate that for whatever amount of time that the minister speaks, she has the equal amount of time to speak. And therefore, she has to fit within. So if it's 3 hours and a half, she has 3 hours and a half or less if she decides to sum up and not talk the amount of garbage that he spoke. Or if she can go very academic today and she could sum up all of everything he said in 2.5 hours and also indicate to the country that in light of the nonsense we heard for 5 hours, I am actually able to tell you what I am able to do and provide an alternative in 2 hours.
But so, would you expect it to do that, or do you expect like apparently it's a one-upmanship game that's well, I don't know if it's common in the House, but it's like you speak long, I need to speak long. Whereas I agree with you. Show them up by summarizing it.
I don't think the 5 hours is necessary. I don't think that she's even going to go down that road to even speak for 5 hours. If she does, I hope it's full of great things. That's what I can say.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I don't know if anybody could fill 5 hours with a monologue on the budget.
I will say, though, that she has been able to outdo him in terms of intellectually and politically in her budget responses. Her budget responses, 8 out of the 9 times, or 7 out of the 9 times have been she hit it out of the ballpark. I don't think this one should be too hard for her either. This is a walk in the park, if you ask me.
Well, the thing is, she already would outdo him if she could just pronounce buku properly. It's a very low bar this year.
Listen, I was wondering if the man was having a semi-stroke, knock on wood, because he was starting to fumble and mumble, and I'm like, what is happening?
the thing is, again, I think he's been in the game long enough, and Buko has he not ever been to Tobago? Like, maybe I'm taking it for granted because I lived in Tobago, but
it's not that. It's that he doesn't care. And those things like the pronunciation of a word like penal and debe and buko and you know, lekoto and all of those things, he doesn't care. It doesn't matter to him. He doesn't care if he offends people either. If he decides to say boko, he says boko and move on. You know what I mean? And for everybody else sitting close to him, it was a big joke. That's not a joke, given the fact that Tobago has been given pittance as well.
All right, so we got some of that out of the way. Now to the meat in the matters. I mean, I'll be honest. I wasn't able to get 10 pages of notes. I was just kind of looking for the things that I knew I wanted to look for. But on the detail side of it now, first thing I want to do, one of the things that bothers me every time there's a budget presentation, at least with Minister Imbit, is the fact that he makes a lot of claims in his lead up. You know, there's supposed to be a part in, this is what we did, but he will kind of use a style of communication saying, well, we achieved growth by X%. Well, that's nice, but X% could mean anything. X% of 0 is 0. X% of 1 is less than 1. Like, what does it mean?
Questions.
We didn't get a lot of contextual information or details to show us, ooh, it really was big growth, a lot of money growth, or it was something to be impressed by. We just got, you know, generalized statements of, yeah, well, things happen, but we don't know exactly what happened.
So as he started his monologue, I started taking notes and asking questions. So here's my first question. How come the resilience of the economy is not trickling down to the society? That's the first thing. Secondly, how come the revenue generation into the economy that he's talking about is not reaching the common man? The third question is, what government achievements is he talking about that has been so significant that it has benefited the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago? And if he's talking about infrastructural work, friend, if you drive down the highway in the middle of a heavy rainfall, that lane that drain that we have had for umpteen years that divides the north and south southbound lanes that they're trying to turn into a lane is nothing but an overflowing drain that can cause a serious accident. And to start with, it has fallen short with regard to its when it was due, and I don't know. It's literally, and I'm not saying this. Drivers and commuters on that highway has consistently, and my students have said, Doc, it is a hazard. And if you don't know how you're driving down the highway on a wet, rainy day when that thing is overflowing, or when the pumps are at work and pushing water into the other lanes, you could, and you don't take your time, you could run off the road. So let's not talk about achievements, right? Achievements that this government seems to be talking about are achievements as it pertains to its relationship with Venezuela and all of the oil and gas deals and brokerage and negotiations that has been made, that they're saying to us is not going to come to fruition until 2027. So until then, tie your belly with rope.
Well, so one of the things I found interesting, they have special projects. 3 of the items in the special projects category was, well, we're going to sell assets.
I have a concern about that.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what my concern is, and then you can tell me yours. My concern is, okay, let's just say somehow we manage to sell all of them, which I don't think is going to be easy, but let's just say we do. I don't think the oil and gas is going to come online right after, and I think we might actually be looking to find other things to sell. And even if the gas comes online, right, depending, according to some people on Talking Point, not going to name names, Karen Estachera, we're not going to have enough gas anyway when those projects come online. So, yeah, I think this might be the tip of the iceberg, except they've already been trying to sell the refinery, they've already been trying to sell Magdalena, so now the clearance in our budget isn't magically going to allow it to just slot into place so that we'll have sales of assets in order to make up the deficit. Because at some point, S&P is telling, the warning from S&P, stop borrowing all the time before you get to junk bond status. You know?
How about we sell how about we sell the diplomatic center? How about let's start selling assets?
Why was it named the diplomatic center?
Diplomatic center. Let's sell the international financial center. Let's sell those things because, you know, those are the things, you know, let's sell the frivolous things. Because when a country and a government start talking about selling assets, those assets are not the assets of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. It's the assets of the state of Trinidad and Tobago. And by extension, that means it is the assets of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And no government, without consultation and talking about at no cost to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, should be selling assets. The refinery should not be sold. Magdalena should not be sold. There's other innovative ways in which these assets can be repurposed, reoperationalized. And if we're smart, which the government isn't at this stage, and I don't think they care at all, is that we have enough talent in Trinidad and Tobago from an engineer perspective, from a petroleum engineering perspective, from an innovation perspective, from an entrepreneurial perspective, from a governance perspective, to do an assessment of the Petrotrin refinery and its subsidiary companies to ascertain whether or not, one, how much money has been made, and two, the potential of the refinery, as well as we can do a government-to-government relationship with another country to operationalize the refinery. But guess what? Apparently, the Ghanaian company is under investigation. One of the three that they have.
I think they were. I'm not sure if they're currently, but I did see one report saying that they were under investigation by the SEC, which kind of after Jindal.
Really actually do some due diligence and try and get things done in a way that can engender further or a semblance of public trust and confidence. Tell me you are spending $400 million to upgrade the Hilton Hotel, but then $56 million for the upgrade of the Magdalena Hotel, which is also possibly going to be sold or leased. And I'll tell you this, I don't trust the word of the minister and by extension the government as it pertains to the words sold or leased. Why? Because somehow they feel it's a synonym and it can be used interchangeably. And I think it's an attempt to hoodwink the country. And this country needs to stand up and say, we don't want the refinery to be sold. Nobody sells a refinery. In St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands, they put their refinery on hold for 7 years because it was not making money. Guess what? A couple of years back, they reopened the refinery and it is making money. So why should we be selling assets? And we have seen that our economy has contracted when we have sold assets or when we have removed certain aspects of our certain key elements of our economy. Trinidad and Tobago our economy was grown on an agrarian system and an agrarian industry, rice and sugar and all of those things. Look at what happened with the closure of Caroni 1975 Limited. We lost competitive advantage internationally because we got scared because at the time corn, syrup and beetroot and honey and all of those things were becoming a thing on the European market. And it didn't last 5 years. And we were too hurried to sell off and to close down the sugar industry. Look at what is happening in Guyana. They're benefiting from more than a dual economy because they have minerals, they have oil and gas, and they have sugar. Why can't Trinidad and Tobago be the same? Are we so dumb that we are just going to allow these people to dictate our future at their whim and fancy and sell off everything that we possibly own and work so damn hard over the years for? That's not how we do business. That's not how we run a country. We don't run a country by selling off assets and by taxing people into debt.
I think an argument to support your case is the fact that what family is gonna willingly, when a family has a business or property, a building, right? Like they don't sell it off.
No.
They keep it.
They try their best to I mean, that's their very, very, very last resort. If they can't salvage the business, reinvent the business, downscale it and then reinvent it and expand it again. That's how business and entrepreneurship works. And he stood up there talking about the achievements of the Minister of Trade and this one and that one and the other. The whole bunch of them has not been able to come up with innovative ways to diversify the economy, to grow the economy, to improve conditions for economic growth and development, to access better foreign exchange business and foreign direct investment. Those are key aspects of our economy, growth and development. And I am not the only person ranting and raving right today or in the last couple of days. Every part of the business sector is not happy with the condition in which we are in, nor what was presented in that 5 hours of rambling rubbish.
I mean, there were some other things that came out from the night of. There was a lot of talk of digitization, but we are so poor at implementing digitization on multiple levels, and that seemed to be one focus. The focus on agriculture, reduce allocation to agriculture. National security is an important issue. Reduce allocation to national security. Education ministry can't pay all its bills. Reduce allocation to education ministry. I'll say this with regards to the sale of Magdalena. I think that entire asset was ill-conceived from the start, and the truth of the matter is what's telling is Hilton pulled out, because they're like, we're not gonna do the maintenance, the renovations of this. It's not worth it. We see that it's not worth it.
At Magdalena a couple of weeks ago, and the hotel is on a beautiful piece of property, right? They have done certain improvements with regard to the beaches and creating a private area. Well, what I would say is a private beach, but you know what I mean. They've done, they've put infrastructure in place to prevent erosion and all of those things, right? But it's not like Magdalena is going to be the only hotel that is on a beachfront of that sort. Well, but there are hotel chains that are out there that can invest in Magdalena and make it into something great. The problem,
Dr. Mohammed, is northeast trade winds, the sea blast on that side. Yes. Most of the big hotels are on the other side of the island. So,
but what is happening? I mean, look at how many beach houses exist on the eastern coast of Trinidad in Mayaro, and people are doing what they can. They are new. What should I say? There's new material that can be used to reduce the effects of sea blast.
It's not just that, and it goes on to what other critics of the situation that has come out. I didn't get to the story with the Hotel Association and also one of these advisors to the THA. We could have the airport and we could have the hotels. Magdalena will probably be financially viable, not even with new materials and technology to make the maintenance easier, but rather if they got enough customers to allow it to get enough revenue, including foreign customers. So
I have a very important question for you. Where are we getting 3 million people to pass through Tobago new terminal?
With no marketing, we're not going to get 3 million foreign national visitors.
Because I'm trying to figure out, is it that he was counting all of the cemeteries that exist in Tobago, and he's counting the amount of persons that might be buried in Tobago? So those are the 3 million souls that would be passing through Tobago, to Tobago's airport. Because I mean, it made no sense. It made no sense. Trinidad and Tobago, Piaco International, has an average of about, and I say I'm using this cautiously, about 1 million people passing through the airport annually. Right? That's Piaco International Airport. That's not the same for Tobago, right? If they get 200,000 people passing through Tobago,
but then 1 million
PNR International annually, that's a lot.
1 million who? 1 million foreign tourists or 1 million nationals and diaspora?
1 million people.
Of which most of, let's be honest, nationals and diaspora. Let's just be plain.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And let me tell you something. Another thing is, how could you, so they want to take control, the central government has taken control of the airports authority. They have control of the airports authority. They are the ones that are negotiating for flights to come into the island. how could you be restricting the tourism division and saying, well, that's the job of the airports authority to get airlines to come and land and do the arrangement? Why just not allow Tobago the opportunity to go and search for the airlines and the routes and the destinations that are going to be viable for them in the short, medium, and long term? Why are they,
Yes.
it's even evidential that the government is taking an active attempt, they're actively behaving in a manner to strangle Tobago and to prevent them from achieving the THA goal of Tobago being the greatest island on the planet.
The thing is,
and part of being the greatest island on the planet, the greatest island on the planet, is to allow them to go and seek out their tourism markets.
the thing is, one of the things that doesn't get a lot of play in the national conversation is the fact that usually, or one of the hidden motivations for stopping people in government service from doing good work is the ones who don't want to work, not wanting to look bad in comparison. So instead of upping their game, they're like, nah, they make us look bad. They can't be doing things. I'm not saying that's what's going on here, but I'm just saying that's a possible thing that could happen, right? Because think about it.
If the THA is successful, then the PNM is the chances of the PNM being successful politically is diminished.
Think about it. You're basically telling people, we'll do the work. Let us do the work. If you don't want to do the work, we'll do the work. And you're telling them, no, I don't want you to do the work. But
they're blaming, and it's a blame game. You would tell me $400 million for the upgrade of Hilton, right, in Trinidad, and $205 million allocated to Tobago for developmental projects. So one major project in Tobago is larger than the overall amount of developmental work for Tobago.
Central government wants to control the development of Tobago. That's what they want to do.
Thing.
And the Tobago Council, the Tobago Council allowed this to happen. The Tobago Council, the PNM, allowed this to happen. They did not care, right?
Yes, they did.
With that said, the airport, which is one of the two now, because there's going to be another attempt to do a hotel, but the airport, you're talking about sale of assets. Before, I just want to get one other line of the discussion going, but just to close this off, I'm not entirely sure how the airport was financed, but it might just be, I'm not entirely sure, right? Just saying, it might already technically be sold if we can't pay off whatever the financial arrangement is. Just saying, I've said this before. The Xi Jinping International Airport will be paying royalties.
The airport is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful structure. I think Tobagonians are amazed that, it's beautiful. Is it feasible? I don't think so.
Here's the analogy. Let me give an analogy, because people don't understand when, like, your concerns and my concerns, they don't normally get it. Because there are people who say, well, we legitimately need a new airport. It's like, cool, a family that's growing, maybe they have one child and the wife is pregnant with another child, and they have a two-bedroom apartment, and they're saying we need to upgrade. We need more room because our family is growing. But we don't go from a two-bedroom apartment to a 16-bedroom house.
Yeah, agreed.
Right? We need a bigger house, but we don't necessarily need to go so far, right? Yes, I understand sometimes you invest for the future, right? It's cheaper to pay now than to pay later. But the thing is, if we put things in place to have 16 children, then fine. But in regards to the analogy, we're not putting those things in place. Marketing is one of them.
Let's add a
400 million.
Let me add a different perspective to it for a second, too. There's a reason why Grantley Adams International does not have those chutes that aircraft come all the way so you move from the aircraft to the chute into the airport. Why? Because they are pushing sand, sea, and sun, and that they want you to feel like you are on an island, so that they give you the island experience of walking off the plane, getting the breeze up from the
which is kind of cool, by the way. It is cool whenever I go domestic. I actually do like that part of it.
I do as well, and I can't understand why it is, if Trinidad is the industrialized island, and we need that kind of setup here in Piaco, why didn't we keep the authenticity of the ANR International Airport, giving it the expansion that it needs to cater for more aircraft, increasing the size of the departure lounge for international departures, upgrading the airport as a whole, but keep the authenticity of the island vibe.
We haven't, and this comes from Karen, we have not developed a coherent tourism product. We're just going all over the place with it. Willy-nilly, scatterbrain. And by the way, 400 million. This actually put some perspective for me. I didn't realize this until you said it. 400 million for renovations of Hilton. Well, Barbados spends 100 million US on marketing their island. That's 600 million TT. They're about 6.7 million TT. So to renovate one hotel, we have over half of Barbados potentially's marketing budget. Think about that. Think about that.
It's all about wastage and friendships and who can get contracts now, and who would be able to finance our campaign in 2015. Yeah,
because marketing dollars go out. They don't stay in. But with that said, the opposition leader, she's going to enter the debate today, of course. One of the things, though, coming back to what I initially said about the budget, not a lot of detail. And then there's always some time before he goes into allocations where he says, my ministerial colleagues will provide some of the details, which more often than not, I don't really think that happens. Transparency is not a strength of the political cast of Trinidad and Tobago. But with that said, I completely
agree.
What are you hoping for? You've already said you're hoping or you expect the opposition leader to be a bit more efficient with her time. What are you hoping for from the ministers? Because in theory, they are also part of the official process in this whole thing with regards to letting us know what the plan is.
But when you tell me that if for national security you're going to get $6.1 billion, I want to know what are you going to do with $6.1 billion for the next financial year, beyond just simply buying 2,000 vehicles. And on top of that, I have a question. The vehicles that are currently in existence and the ones that need maintenance, what are you going to do with that? Is that going to just become scrap iron? And is that simply going to be just parked in a dump yard and allowed to rot? And there's no recycling process. There's no, how do we, break down these old vehicles into something else? I looked at somewhere, I was looking at another country that they scrapped an entire bus and they scrapped it down so that there were no chemicals and nothing that would destroy the marine life and corrupt the
ocean,
purity of the ocean. And they sunk the bus so that it would start a marine, create an ecosystem. And then 1 year after, they dove down in to see how the progress was going, and they were amazed at how fantastic it was. What are we doing with all of these derelict vehicles that the police service is no longer using? And for how long are we going to just continue buying new vehicles without providing officers with proper training, development, monitoring and evaluation, reporting, accountability, transparency, improving the system, improving processes? What about that?
Well, Shane, I mean, they recently had to impound a police vehicle because it was potentially involved in a kidnapping, as in it was the vehicle of the kidnappers. So we need to buy a new vehicle to replace it because that's now evidence for the state, right?
And it comes back to the monitoring and evaluating and the processing and the procedures and having accountability and knowing, being able to track via GPS where your vehicles are and what they're doing, right? So that at least we would know that we're safe by the person, we're safe, not only safe from criminals, but we're also safe from those who might be involved in a level of criminality. Right? So that's one. That's national security. Two, education. We just saw what happened to St. George's College after $10 million was spent on it. And Homegirl was just, well, this is the scope of work, scope of work, scope of work, scope of work. They stick to a narrative that is so vague that it makes them sound idiotic. And I can't stand the idiocy of some of these ministers. What are you doing with $7.5 billion for the next financial year? And how are you going to allocate that $7.5 billion to improving the education system, improving the lives of students, being innovative in education and teaching and learning, as it pertains to motivating teachers, as it pertains to providing greater security, as it pertains to, boosting and sustaining the mental health of students across the board. I mean, I'm listening to this morning to a story of a child committing suicide in a secondary school at a Form 4 level. I mean, what is happening in this country as it pertains to the development, protection, and the sustainability of the student life? What is the minister doing? It's not about, we can build 1,000 secondary schools in Trinidad and Tobago. And if the system is broken, there's no framework for the protection of teachers from violence, the protection of students from violence, the sustainability in terms of remedial attention for students. I mean, Homeboy said he had a special project, and he put it under special projects. $2.something million for, no, $5 million for remedial mathematics program. Really? Well, I have no problem with remedial programs, because I think it's very important. However, how are you spending $5 million? Where is the $5 million going to be invested in remedial mathematics program? Why not maths and English? Because both maths and English are critical to students being able to, one, get a job post CSEC and A-levels.
Well, just
accountability.
Here's the thing, just to add to what you're saying. So we need to know how they spend any money, especially since they've reduced the allocations, and one could argue there have been questions. Are they getting enough money? Do they have enough resources? Particularly with education, where it seems as though they just never have enough money to do all the renovations, maintenance, pay all the salaries, buy all the school supplies. Why is it when the private families need to provide toilet paper and copy paper, right? But we reduced education by 500 million. And we couldn't get all the renovations done last year. So I don't know if that's the thing. Even more than last year, your question of how the money is being spent, I think is pertinent, because you need to justify to me how you will improve the situation while spending less.
How you're spending it, where it's going, how it's going to be allocated, what are going to be the long-term results, what are your achievables, it's everything from. These people don't know how to think innovatively. They don't know how to think entrepreneurially. Clearly, they don't know how to manage money.
Well, I don't know if you have any more areas to touch on before we wrap things up.
I honestly think that, we have to move away from just a dependency of oil and gas. And I would think after 9 years of hearing the same thing about oil and gas, that we need to move away from the whole dependency of oil and gas. And that comes with another word called diversification. And the problem with the word diversification is that this government just doesn't know how to do it. They know the word, but in terms of the implementation and how we get diversification off the ground, they have no clue. And it's not like Trinidad and Tobago is incapable of diversification. It's about providing the opportunities to the private sector and the public sector, and doing public-private partnerships to ensure that we have a robust diversification process and plan.
The problem with that is the people that actually know how to do things, who are not just lawyers, who may not actually even be good practicing lawyers or whatnot. The people who know how things work, how things are built, how to do supply chain management and distribution management, etc., they don't have, as a friend of mine said just last night, the bandwidth to keep up with what's going on in the country and to get involved. So what we have are people their whole job is literally, I mean, technically to some extent I am classified in this segment as well, or I can, right, along similar lines, but their whole job is literally just to do that. And they can't even do the general governance well, much less than step out of their comfort zone to say, okay, tourism, agriculture, education, other ways to divest the economy, etc., etc., etc. And I think a lot of it is, you're right, to put it bluntly, the reason why the efforts are so bad is they just don't know. Which is again why an airport with nothing else changing around it, I don't think is a plan. It's just a hope and a wish. Because Magdalena essentially is the first example of that. The plan was, well, we'll renovate Magdalena, so we'll have Magdalena. So when the foreign airlines say we need better room stock, we have Magdalena. That was, at one point in time, the entirety of the tourism plan in Tobago.
In that one speech, in the same speech, the man said $56 million to renovate Magdalena. And then in his next line, he said, possibly explore selling or leasing the Magdalena Hotel. And I was like, wait, what?
Because
so you waste $56 million of Trinidad and Tobago taxpayers.
No one will buy it if we don't
sell an asset.
No one will buy it if we don't renovate it. You're not going to get someone like who's going to look at the bricks or what, I can't remember what it was called before, right? I can't remember, but the point is they bought it and renovated it. Magdalena is not that, and I think that's not because the person who bought the bricks did themselves a disservice, right? I think it's because Magdalena is such a worse asset than that hotel, right? That has so much more problems than that hotel. And I mean, the track record of Hilton pulling out is not going to help things, I would imagine.
I still think that we can find the right chain of hotel companies.
I'm too cynical about it. I'm too cynical about it. Listen, they had people who didn't even want to buy the villas and plantations because the sea blast in that particular area of the island was that bad. And I know, and they bought a house on the East Coast, huh? They bought, but the sea blast and plantations was worse than the sea blast in Bacalat, right? So.
Listen, and I'll study pot a little bit, right? I'll study pot a little bit. You know, I like to throw my bacchanal, and I'll say this. My eyes are on the PNM. And I know that they have division, and I know that they are brutalizing certain ministers, and I understand that this Napoleon is restricting the potential for young ministers to reach their full potential, and I'm aware of it, and I'll talk about it in the coming months. But if people think the PNM is as strong as they are, they're not. They're not as strong as they are. It's just that sooner rather than later, all of the mess that is happening within is going to flow out, and people are going to become very unhappy. Their own supporters are going to be very unhappy with some of the victimization that is taking place within that government.
All I will say is this. I do not have inside information on one of
I do.
You do. But I don't have, outside of maybe talking to you, I don't have any inside information on the most recent controversy that happened. Have not spoken about it publicly, right? I don't think you have either. All I'll say was this. I suspect...
Oh, no, I'm not talking about that one.
No, but I am. But I'm going to say this. I think that is, and you don't need to comment on it, that is also a sign to me that, A, the divisions aren't just there, but they're actively being exacerbated. They're actively starting the fight now. Keith Rowley's retirement starts the clock, and myself...
Napoleon doesn't believe that he should be in the line of retirement. And Napoleon is doing everything possible politically to cut down the ones that have the potential to succeed in terms of the hierarchy of the party.
So the clock technically started already.
The ones that are favored by the people and the ones that are seen as the ones that can take the party forward in a positive manner.
The ones that could do the work, the ones that actually...
The ones that have been silent for 5 years and the ones that have been taking back seats for 5 years are the ones that just don't want to be collateral damage. And they've done absolutely nothing wrong. They've toed the line, they've done their jobs, and they've done it quietly, but yet they have a target on their back. And if they don't realize that us as political scientists know, oh well, stop looking at the UNC and what the UNC is capable of or incapable of, because the UNC has had a record of regenerating itself, and I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen in 2025.
I mean, I'm slowly getting there just because as an incumbent, the PNM it's very hard. I can't make a case to sell their third term. I can't, right?
And on top of it, Sean, we must never underestimate Kamala Prasad-Bissessar and what she's capable of
This
as
is
a
where I might
politician.
disagree with you, right? This is where we might have to agree to disagree and end the conversation here because we don't have time to get into this. I did want to take a break, but I'm going to scrap that. Let's go straight into opening up the phone lines. Want to hear from you, the viewer. I know that we're coming in a little bit late, but the conversation, of course, it got a little bit more far-reaching than just the budget because the budget is tied into the greater conversation of the upcoming elections. I don't know if maybe callers are thinking that we weren't going to have a calling segment and they're not going to show up, but with that said, we can continue the conversation to some extent because there are a couple of things that I still haven't asked you. So,
Tell me, ask me.
first things first, election budget or non-election budget? Because there were kind of maybe some goodies, maybe, but not really, but maybe.
Election budget, it was a budget that clearly indicated that we would have no money. We don't know what to do with what we have, and that we are incapable of providing the country with any sweeteners for the 2025 budget.
Yeah, but
and it's as if they've thrown their hands up in the air and say, this is what it is, take it or leave it. And I feel
but
it's more
public
like
sector workers got an increase in minimum wage. And the
By
rest of the country
$2?
didn't. And the rest of the country didn't. So I mean, the cynics would say, well, it is a lot of P&M supporters in those low-paying jobs.
I don't, listen, to be honest with you, I don't care whether it's PNM workers, I don't care if it's UNC workers, supporters, I don't care about those things. I care about the fact that this government felt that $2 was something that they should be beating their chest about, when these persons that they single out, the MTS workers and all of those people, they want their lives at risk because they are security. Two, they work long hours and they do human service. And a lot of times, some people don't even know how to say good morning to these people.
I'll say this though, one of my concerns with any sort of wage increase right now is adding to the pressures to drive inflation back up. So ironically, I don't know, a higher increase might actually have worse consequences. We have San Fernando on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on the air.
Hi, morning, Sean and Julius.
Morning.
Morning, San Fernando. I want to just make a couple of comments quickly, because I don't have time. One, I want to compliment the Minister of Finance and the PS and whoever technocrats you have in the Ministry of Finance. To write a 5-hour speech and say nothing, that is excellent. I don't know how you could be so good and craft a whole document without saying anything. I compliment them on that. The second thing is, in the whole budget speech, I see all the laughing become a TV meet. In the whole budget speech, we hear in this thought of WASA thinking about raising rates and ICNTT thinking about raising rates and have property tax. And when you look at the limited income of the pensioner, where does that put the pensioner in this whole scenario, right? Because there are some pensioners, like myself, finish work, a home, and a limited income, and now I have to face all these things, and I don't have an income coming into me to deal with all that. By the time I pay for my medication, my ICNTT bill, my flu bill, whatever, my money done, that is the seriousness of the situation. So there was nothing in the budget spoken about how are we dealing with pensioners in this situation. The other thing I want to mention, all this talk about oil and gas. Shane, I think the person's name is Shane there with you.
Yeah.
Just remember this. This is a hit and miss situation based on the geopolitical system situation with Venezuela, America, and we could just watch at Israel and Iran right now and see the up and down that we have in. So that situation, I know Shell is still working on their end of the law and humanity and humanity field, but that is not a surety, and you're giving people false hope that in 3 years' time we'll be able to monetize this gas. The last thing I want to say, every field on the East Coast, be it BP, be it the TSP field, are brown fields, depleted fields, old fields. Even the ex-NGC, TCANs, and PUI platforms are supposed to be decommissioned at this point in time. All those fields have platforms that have served their time for 40 plus years, and they are up for decommissioning. And so those are brown fields. Those are fields that have decommissioning status now. And so I don't know what kind of hopes they're trying to build here. Nobody wants to drill deep attention that everybody will go to Guyana because Exxon has proved that. Nobody wants to come to Trinidad, they are going to Suriname. So I don't know this thing about Senate are a bit wrong and they hope to get deep water drilling. I don't know where that's coming from and who are the people who are advising them on that. That is so false. And so the people are hanging on to false hope here. And it is all because we have an election coming and they have to give the people something to hold. But basket don't hold water. So somebody needs, I hope the opposition just stand up in the house today and unmask this whole thing, because this is madness going on in this country. And the poor just getting poorer and the rich just getting richer. And the gap has widened drastically. They took 15 years to restructure Atlantic LNG. 15 years to restructure Atlantic LNG. And they took a further 12 years to restructure the supplemental petroleum tax. And that they still have to put that into play. So I don't know where all this money that they're saying that they're going to make coming from. And I don't know what they're going to do in the next 2 years or so. I have graduates coming out of UE in my house. Can't find a job. Two of them doing OJT, and the OJT go up in February. What are doing with them after that, Sean? Give me a little idea. So only give a little advice here.
I need similar advice myself, caller, believe it or not.
Because
I do as well. I do as well. Let me tell you something. There's something that I've realized, and I make no apologies for saying this. What this government has done has completely polarized the entire nation and the entire workforce. And that is why people are not getting jobs the way that they deserve to get jobs. And if you're not a member of the PNM, and if you're not a member of a party card holder, or you don't come out of the Heliconia Foundation, then you are ignored, right? And most times when they have when they've advertised a position in the public service, whether it's PTSD or any of the other entities, it's because it's for formalities and they've already have their people in place. And that's been the modus operandi of this government. As long as you're not a PNM, they don't care, and they don't care for about the wider scope of the workforce.
We have another caller, but I'll just say this: a similar sentiment was expressed on this show with regards to the refinery. It is believed that they already have their preferred bidder waiting in the wings, right? And they're trying to figure out how to get the asset and the sale done. Now, we have Sugar on the Sunny Line. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Hey, gentlemen.
Morning, Professor.
You said, anyway, they have good public servants.
Yes. No, not when you were there, Professor. I'm talking about now.
No, I'm talking about now. You should go on a health center.
Okay.
It's extremely well run.
Okay.
And not only that, they take advice. Because I remember they used to have everybody come in for our clinic on 8 o'clock in the morning and people staying until lunch. And I made a suggestion that they give people different times, half an hour difference to the 11 o'clock or something. And that cut down the problems there. But there are many other things they did. As regards this property tax business, I listened the night, not to your station, and Al-Wari was on a station, and he said that the property tax in San Fernando was based on the value of the land. Now, I don't know about that at all, because the only time we had a land tax in Trinidad was before they get local government, and that is when it was 24 cents an acre for the whole country. And from the time government bringing local government with the city of Port of Spain, they put a property tax based on the value of the property, not the land. And afterwards, boroughs and things followed that. And then the government went outside, where you were still paying the land tax and the other tax on the building. That's how we get the land and building taxes. And finally, we keep talking about this Tobago and talking about they're not getting sufficient money. And I don't understand the reason for that. Tobago have 4% of the population. The government get the money, and they give local government some to do certain activities. Tobago get about 6%, that is double the percentage of people they have.
No, that's 4%. Tobago is 4%, Professor, and the last
count... They got 4.3%.
The last count,
How much?
apparently, Tobago is 5% of the population currently, potentially.
The last figure I hear was 4.1. And even so, they get this as a percentage of gross revenue. This is after government, central government, take the money. Right? And this morning I hear somebody complaining that the central government want to run Tobago. Central government supposed to run the whole country in Tobago. But they want to put themselves on equality with Trinidad and Tobago. And they want Tobago to have the same amount of powers. And that,
Well,
in my opinion, is the problem.
Well, okay, but Professor, primarily, especially with tourism, one of the reasons why I think it's safe for me to say that Tobago should have a greater hand in Tobago tourism is because central government took one tourism company and made two tourism companies, one for Trinidad, one for Tobago. So central government itself recognized that the two islands needed to be managed separately. It's just that neither tourism company is worth much of anything. So it is what it is.
But Tobago House of Assembly have a say in tourism.
Not
A very limited one.
Yeah, a limited one because they don't have a budget to do anything with regards to tourism. To be fair, too,
I talk about a say.
A say is not meant anything when you have a government that doesn't want to hear about doesn't listen to a party that is opposed to them in quote unquote governance in Tobago.
Are you suggesting the House of Assembly that listen to anybody?
no, the central government doesn't necessarily listen to the House of Assembly.
No, it doesn't.
I am not supporting any of them. All of them totally useless. But to sit down and try the pot calling the kettle black, I don't argue with that.
Well,
Anyway.
I mean, they still, thank you, Professor. I'll say this. There have been things from the THA that I don't like, but they haven't proven themselves to be completely like the other parties. They may have made some of the mistakes.
That's correct.
I am willing to put aside my questions for some of those things. But if we see more of the same from them, my willingness to put aside those questions will be reduced because you're showing me that you're not going to be anything different. If they can show to be something different, and again, I'll say this, I applaud Kelvin Morris and the Chief Secretary for coming together and doing a joint press conference over crime. And people might say, well, it didn't really mean anything, it didn't achieve anything. They don't have the ability to achieve things, but people are looking at them. Both sides.
And it sends a message. It sends a very clear message as to where their minds is at. And if you can have the meeting of minds on the issue of crime and how you can weed out criminality out of the island, then that goes a long way. I've also said that there should be checks as it pertains to persons getting on the ferry and going over to Tobago. There should be checks of vehicles and there should be checks of equipment that is going over there because it's an open, it's open door season.
I know it's open. I know exactly how it's open. I don't want to go into details because then, might be giving people ideas, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I also am very confident that I don't think there's anybody in charge that will be able to implement a system that will do that job, that will be that check without causing a bigger mess, right? The thing about also Tobago being allowed to make certain decisions for itself, I believe, depending on your interpretation of it or your reading of it, or it might be the objective reading of it, the THA Act and it's the fifth schedule, certain things are under the purview of the THA.
And several things actually under the purview of the THA.
Even the airports and the potential marina, one would wonder, it's not under the THA or?
No. It's not under the THA.
It's not supposed to be?
The Airport Authority is not under the THA.
Okay. No, I'm talking about new developmental projects. Would the airport be or not be? I think...
Not be. The airport is a central government project. It's a legacy project for Keith Rowley. That's why it's built as if it's the diplomatic center. That's why I told you, we need to start selling assets. Let's start selling assets that belong to Keith Rowley and to sell the diplomatic center, sell things that belong to Imbert, sell one at Alexandra Place. Those are assets that should be sold in order for us to get revenue. After all, we've been spending a lot of taxpayers' money in rent.
With that said, I think we have San Fernando on the line to close the show. Good morning, calling on here.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning, Dr. Mohammed.
Morning.
You know, Sean, well, let me first say this quickly. That marina that the finance minister mentioned in Tobago is to try and one-up the THA. Because the
Correct.
THA had plans for a marina, not where they located, the one up the coast.
Yes, further to the southwest.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is actually a better place for a marina. When you
Correct.
talk about a marina with boats, catering for boats 18 meters, right?
Yeah.
You're serious. Okay?
I'll say this, though, caller. All I'll say is this. There is one minor detail that the THA has not addressed publicly that I know of personally, and I won't say more than that on it. With regards to their proposal for the marina.
I know what you're talking about. But let me say this, Dr. Mohammed. I listened to you this morning, and I just wanted to add something to what you said, or put something into the mix of what you said. With respect, you spoke about the Hovenza refinery in St. Croix.
Yes.
And I think you are not entirely accurate with Hovenza refinery. At Hovenza refinery, it is still there. It is not operating. Let me say this. For a brief time, it operated in 2021 because it was closed down. They had issues with the EPA. The Environmental Protection Agency in the U.S. had closed them down. And a lot of things went back and forth, and it sold, and it went into bankruptcy from one of the owners. And actually, right now, it is they're still in a situation where they're trying to get rid of some of the materials stored on the site and that type of thing. So it is not open. It is operational in its management, and they are still trying. They have not. It is not up for what you call it. It is not up for closure in that sense.
Right.
It has an owner, but it is still there. After since 20, because it was closed in 2012, and it's still in a cycle. I'm gonna put it that way. And I'm bringing that back to our refinery and our sugar product that we had in our refinery. Let me say about the sugar, about the Carney 1975 Limited. Carney 1975 Limited was closed because the same thing that the refinery was suffering from. A lot of corruption inside those two state enterprises. A lot of corruption. And in Mr. Pandey wrote off about $800 million. It went back into debt. Now the issue I have with the government, I'm not saying that they don't have a point in terms of weeding out the corruption, because corruption is what caused those two places. And especially the refinery, I am intimately involved inside, and I could tell you the amount of corruption took place inside it. The problem that the state has is that anytime there's an issue with those things, we get frightened and we decide we're going to sell it off. We're closing it down. There is no plan to say let's close it and then let's reinvent it.
Yeah.
Bring in new management. Start it at the refinery. The refinery could have been started on a smaller scale. All the corruption in Carney 1975 Limited could have been weeded out, and let's start it over. But we panic and we just sell off. And when we sell off, I don't think there is this vision down the road to understand how that one enterprise has a knock-on effect in the community that it is, all the communities it is involved in, and how many people, businesses it affects down the line. And there is no thought in the politician's mind as to these long-term effects. That refinery closure in Marabella there has affected so many communities in and around and further afield in businesses, people. The amount of, they said 5,000 people was in the refinery. I am telling you that refinery closure probably affect about 50,000 people.
I agree.
And that is the situation that I have with these governments. It's the same thing you see now with the Magdalena. I agree with Dr. Mohammed. It's a nice property, and there are things on the. They're not the first country to build a hotel on the windward side.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we're not the first country to do that.
Well,
and they have countries that have them successfully. So it is about management and we seem not to be able to understand how to run things. We could build things. We're building things. You see what we do again with the Coast Guard? We're going to buy more boats. They have a set of them sit down there. They said it's taken 18 months to fix them, and we're going to buy more. That's the problem. That is the problem.
And the justification for it is disgustingly, it just doesn't make sense. So they're saying that it's cheaper to make it make sense. It's cheaper to buy new vehicles, new vessels, than to work on fixing the ones or maintaining the ones that currently exist.
Well, the window for maintaining is gone. We have to renovate them now. Thank you, caller. Here's the thing with Magdalena. I conceded the point with Dr. Mohammed, except I think the real key is that Magdalena would be successful if we had the market share, right? The airport will be successful if we had the market share. The criticism of the airport is not the airport, it's the lack of market share to allow these things to generate enough business to justify itself, or in the case of Magdalena, to pay its own bills, right?
And I'll tell you this, the caller is right, because I was reading what he was saying with regard to the refinery in St. Croix. And one of the things that they have maintained that they are not going to sell this refinery. In fact, there's been attempts to sell the refinery, and it has been shut down by the Senate in the U.S. Virgin Islands. But one of the things that forced the closure of the refinery in 21 was that they found that it posed an environmental threat, rather than a bankruptcy, an economic. It's completely different to the situation here, right? And I'll say this: he made a very good point. Even with Petrotrin, even with the sugar industry, if we knew that there were issues of corruption, overstaffing, duplication of work, all of those things, that's an HR issue. Put proper HR professionals in place to restructure the thing. I am sure we can get it back to efficiency levels.
The problem is similar to, we have proper PR professionals, but do the politicians actually defer to their expertise when making public statements, or do they want to control the narrative in their way, what they think is best? And then how many bumble PR mishaps have we seen?
We need to stop voting for politicians that believe that they know everything. I am an academic, and the caller just called to correct me on St. Croix. Do I look like I'm offended? No, because I don't profess to know everything. But when I was reading about St. Croix back in the day, they did close it down. They made attempts to reopen it, and to this day, they are not saying anything about selling off an asset, right? They're going to work towards improving environmental conditions with the intention to reopen it when it is safe. That's a completely different dialogue to what is happening here in Trinidad and Tobago, So it's a vision, it's innovation, it's creative thinking, it is pride.
I wouldn't even have to go that far. I think it's even simpler than that. If the problem is corruption, why are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater? We're not actually solving the problem, because the corruption
is... If it's an issue of corruption, Sean,
the corruption
then we
is still
should
here.
throw the baby out of the bathwater as it pertains to the government.
No, right, the corruption is still here, because the thing is, the corruption, I think at this point, is inherent in our political environment, and the politicians who are benefiting from said political environment, they don't want to necessarily do anything about it, potentially, allegedly, maybe. Generally speaking, I think that's a reasonable hypothesis to put forward, hint, hint, wink, wink. But, so, you're not solving the problem. The problem is not the asset is a burden. The problem is the corruption with managing the asset is a burden. But rather than solving the problem, we take a shortcut that is detrimental in the long run. That's the best way to go about it. And here's the thing with the refinery. Not only were their communities affected, but now when we have to do road repair, and I think we're importing bitumen, right?
Yes.
The pitch lake is leased. Somebody else technically owns the rights to it or something. Anyway, the point is...
China.
The point is, we were getting bitumen from the refinery. It was just one of the knockoff effects that the implication is that they did not necessarily factor that into the dollars and cents for it to make sense when they were making the decision. At least based on, I get a lot of this one topic for the refinery. I have it's strong opinions, but informed opinions from the callers. Mr. San Fernando is one, the professor from Chaguanas is another, and they both make good cases, and I think they're both right, generally speaking, in that there's more to the pestle here. There was going to be a way to keep the refinery open and for it to be an asset to the country, and we didn't do it. And I'll say that the union had a hand to play in it, but ultimately speaking, the government, I think, at the end of the day, they did not want to actually do the work. They wanted to do the easy thing, which is let's just get rid of it.
I would say this, that Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar has a golden opportunity from 10 o'clock today.
Listen, she's had a golden opportunity for at least 8 years now, huh? And I'm still waiting for the UN to capitalize on it.
It's okay. And it's not that I'm making excuses for her. It's not that I'm making excuses for her. It comes down to that there are no alternatives right now that are going to give us the hope that we need. And at the end of the day, she is the leader of the opposition, and she has an opportunity to stand up and tell the country, as the leader of the opposition, with the hope that she would become the next prime minister, how can she make life better? And I hope she used the time to wipe the floor with Coleman Burt's garbage and provide the opportunity for the country to say, well, okay, you know what, Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar, you've shown yourself to be resilient, and time again, this is one time I require her to be so. For the sake of the nation and for the hope and the betterment of our people. I
want to thank all the callers for calling in. I want to thank Dr. Mohammed for joining me once again. We went far and deep with this discussion, but it was good. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Mohammed.
Thank you so much for having me again.
And I'll just say this to show folks, I criticize generally all political parties somewhat equally. Of course, the opposition and government, they have more things to do. They publish more things, they're out there, they expose more. That doesn't mean that I don't want them to do well, both of them, because if they do well, that is only to our benefit. So for people who want to draw a line in the sand and want me to draw a line in the sand, I'm not going to do that. I will criticize people and still hope that they do better, or maybe my criticism is not warranted. But either way, we want to see people do well. Do I expect everybody to do well? Do I expect everybody to improve? I'll say this, if the voting public demanded more from their politicians, I think they would, because they're smart enough to sense the winds of change, just as Tobago. With that said, make this weekend a good one, as Mr. Shah would always say. Remember your allegiance to this twin island republic, and we will see you next week, God willing. Everyone stay safe. Bye-bye.
WESN.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our